Act 1. Putin's Miscalculation and the Beginning of the War. Cut to archival footage of Putin in his early speeches, confident and self-assured, outlining his vision for Russia's future. Narrator: Vladimir Putin, in his own mind, had been preparing for this moment for years. The narrative he wove for the Russian people and the rationale he used to justify his actions was that of a man reclaiming lost glory. For months, Putin had been fortifying his position, pouring military resources into an invasion force, bolstering his domestic rhetoric with claims of protecting Russian-speaking Ukrainians and preventing NATO's expansion. His advisors, some of the most powerful figures in Russia, told him it would be an easy victory. After all, Ukraine's military was no match for the Russian juggernaut. Kiev would fall within days, and then Ukraine would bend to Russia's will. But what Putin underestimated was not just the determination of the Ukrainian people, it was the deep-seated history of resistance that ran through the veins of this proud nation. It was a history that stretched back to the days of Soviet oppression, through the 2014 Euromaidan revolution, and the long-standing desire for independence. As Russia's tanks rumbled across the border, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, newly elected but already proven in his commitment to his country's sovereignty, stood firm. His initial response was not just that of a leader, but that of a symbol. Footage of Zelensky in the early days of the war, addressing the nation from Kyiv without fear. Zelensky's famous speech, "I am here, we are here," became a beacon of defiance, a message that the world was watching and that Ukraine would not fall easily. Russia had gravely miscalculated not only the strength of Ukraine's military, but also the power of its civilian resistance. Act 2. The brutality of war and Russia's strategic failures. Footage of destroyed Russian tanks, burned out military vehicles, and Ukrainian forces reclaiming territory. Narrator: But in the days following the initial onslaught, Russia's once feared military machine began to show signs of weakness. What had been expected to be a lightning strike turned into a brutal slog. The road to Kiev became a graveyard for Russian soldiers, many of whom were ill-prepared, demoralized, and poorly led. The logistical challenges of war became too much, and soon the invaders found themselves fighting not just against Ukrainian troops, but against an unyielding spirit of resistance. Ukraine, far from the helpless victim Putin had hoped for, quickly mobilized its defenses. Ukrainian soldiers, many of them ordinary men and women who had never seen combat, took up arms. In the cities, civilians formed barricades. They joined the fight in a way the world had never expected. The message was clear: Ukraine was not just defending its land, it was defending its very soul, and the world responded. Footage of international leaders, including Joe Biden, announcing sanctions, sending weapons to Ukraine. Narrator: As Russia's military stumbled, the West, led by the United States and European allies, began to pour aid into Ukraine. Weapons, intelligence, and crucial military training were sent to bolster the Ukrainian resistance. Anti-tank missiles, modern drones, and air defense systems arrived in the hands of Ukrainian forces, giving them a fighting chance. NATO, in effect, became an invisible but vital partner in Ukraine's fight for survival. Yet, this also marked a critical shift in the global balance of power. For all his bluster, Putin now found himself isolated. The economic sanctions imposed on Russia were swift and severe. The ruble plummeted, foreign corporations fled, and the Russian economy began to feel the strain. The country that had once been a formidable global player was now reeling. Act 3. The panic in Moscow and Putin's escalating desperation. Cut to footage of Putin's increasingly erratic public appearances, his speeches growing more defensive with heightened threats of nuclear escalation. Narrator: As Ukraine's strategic counter-offensives continued to gain ground, Putin's desperation became apparent. For a man who had been known for his calculated, often chilling demeanor, he began to show signs of panic. His political standing at home was faltering as the Russian military faced catastrophic losses. For all his posturing, Putin's once unshakable grip on power was now in question. There were murmurs of dissent within his inner circle as oligarchs who had long profited from Putin's rule began to hedge their bets. The Russian president, once seen as the mastermind of a new Russian empire, was now being forced to confront the reality of failure. His response? An escalation of rhetoric, the mobilization of additional forces, and most concerning of all, the renewed threat of nuclear warfare. But as the weeks turned into months, Putin's military did not get stronger. It grew more fractured. Supply chains were disrupted. Morale was shattered. Russian soldiers, many of whom had been conscripts, began to question the very reason they were fighting, and yet, despite this, Putin's regime remained in power, supported by a tight circle of loyalists, many of whom understood that the collapse of the war would mean not just military defeat, but a total unraveling of their power. Act 4. The global geopolitical aftershocks and the world's role. Transition to clips of the UN General Assembly. Global leaders speaking in favor of sanctions and Ukraine's sovereignty. Narrator: The war in Ukraine has not only reshaped the lives of millions, but also the geopolitical landscape. As Russia grows more isolated, China and India have maintained a delicate balancing act. They continue to engage with Russia economically while calling for peace, but neither country is willing to fully endorse Putin's actions. On the other hand, the West has remained united in its support for Ukraine. NATO's solidarity has never been more pronounced, but this has also raised new questions about the future of international alliances. This conflict has become a proving ground for the West's response to authoritarianism and aggression in the 21st century. As we see Ukraine's defiance in the face of overwhelming odds, we are also witnessing a reassertion of Western values, democracy, self-determination, and international law. Conclusion: the heroism of Ukraine and the hope for the future, cut to heart-wrenching footage of families reuniting after being separated by the war, rebuilding their homes, and celebrating the return of Ukrainian soldiers. Narrator: the war is far from over, but Ukraine's spirit endures. What started as a country under siege has become a beacon of resistance, a symbol of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. And though the losses have been great, the resilience of the Ukrainian people shines through. Ukraine's courage has reminded us of the power of unity in the face of tyranny, and it has shown the world that even when the odds are stacked against you, when the threat of annihilation is real, the human spirit will find a way to endure. The international community has rallied around Ukraine, not out of a desire for domination or power, but because the fight in Ukraine is a fight for all of us. It is a fight for the future of freedom, for the future of democracy, for the future of global peace. As Putin's empire falters, Ukraine rises, not just as a nation, but as a symbol of what happens when a people refuse to be silenced.